Hi, folks. You know, if you thought America couldn't get any dumber, I've got a fresh batch of proof that we've officially entered the twilight zone of political theater. We live in a country where the same people who cry about student debt are now literally tearing up the $250,000 piece of paper they spent 4 years in their parents' savings chasing. That's right. Today we're diving into the latest circus act from Columbia University, where freshly minted Ivy League grads thought the best way to protest Trump and free Palestine was to rip up their diplomas. Nothing says stick it to the man quite like torching your own resume. It's the political equivalent of lighting yourself on fire because you're mad at the weather. So grab your popcorn. We're about to watch the intellectual elite prove they're not exactly at the top of the food chain.
University graduates today tore up their diplomas to protest the school's cooperation with the Trump administration. Graduates of the School of International and Public Affairs chanted Free Palestine as they destroyed their sheepskins. It was Alumni Day on campus. The protests are in support of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia grad student and protester now held by ICE agents. And they also object to the concessions made to curb protests on campus.
And we will continue to rage at this institution until Mahmoud Khalil is free. Until students are free to fight for Palestinian rights and liberation.
Some protesters also calling for the dismissal of several Columbia University teachers and administrators.
Well, this one's a masterpiece of performative nonsense, so let's rip it apart. Unlike their diplomas, we'll actually leave something of value when we're done. Now, first off, let's talk about what really happened here. Columbia's brightest, and I put that in quotes, or at least loudest, graduates decided that the best way to protest immigration enforcement and the Trump administration was to shred the very evidence of their six-figure education like a pack of toddlers throwing a tantrum. And they framed it as some kind of bold, selfless act. Sorry, but this wasn't courage. It was cosplay activism. Ivy League edition. Now let's dissect the empty rhetoric and logical fallacies one by one here. They start by claiming that Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian activist and green card holder, was targeted simply for his political speech. But conveniently, they leave out the fact that ICE's official statement and the Trump administration made it clear that Khalil's visa and residency status were under scrutiny because of behavior, specifically his involvement in protests that crossed the line from free speech into campus disruption, vandalism, and harassment. You can chant Free Palestine all day. No one's deporting you for that. But when your activism starts infringing on the rights and safety of others, you're not just assembling peacefully, you're breaking the law. That's not oppression, that's accountability. Then there's the classic bait and switch tactic. They conflate Khalil's immigration status with the broader Palestinian cause, turning this into a geopolitical morality play. These students aren't ripping up their diplomas because of some principled stand against U.S. foreign policy. They're angry that the rules apply to one of their own. Suddenly, enforcing immigration law becomes oppression. That's not how any of this works. And can we talk about their crocodile tears? The same graduates who claimed there was no joy in destroying their diplomas made sure the cameras were rolling, the chants were loud, and the drama dial was cranked up to 11, because nothing says I'm oppressed quite like staging your struggle session on an Ivy League campus with a degree most Americans couldn't afford even if they wanted to. Now, one alum NBC later interviewed Amali Tower actually said, "I had to fight hard to get my master's in international affairs at Columbia." Right. You fought so hard. You got into one of the most elite schools in the country, graduated, and now you're voluntarily torching that achievement to virtue signal on a sunny New York afternoon. That's not fighting oppression. That's the political equivalent of yelling fire in a theater and then crying because a fire department showed up. Now, let's also address the grotesque moral equivalence on display here. Another student told NBC News that they are terrified to set foot on campus. Really? You're terrified? You're tearing up diplomas in broad daylight, live on national television, surrounded by the media, holding signs and chanting with so much as a police baton in sight. And we're supposed to believe you're oppressed? Meanwhile, actual oppressed people around the world don't have the luxury of protesting with a Starbucks in hand and a Columbia degree in their back pocket. And of course, these activists drag in the dark path argument that Columbia is abandoning free speech. No, Columbia's leadership is finally waking up and realizing that free speech doesn't mean free reign to terrorize, harass, and turn the campus into a political battleground at the expense of everyone else's rights. This whole stunt was a masterclass in self-importance, bad faith arguments, and hollow rebellion. They're not risking anything. They're not sacrificing anything. They're just publicly shredding their own credentials and expecting the world to treat it like some profound act of resistance. It's not. It's a temper tantrum disguised as activism, and it's proof that a fancy degree doesn't buy you common sense. So if these Columbia grads want to tear up their $250,000 diplomas over a deportation case rooted in clear violations of immigration law, by all means, let them. Just don't pretend it's anything more than the world's most expensive cry for attention. Meanwhile, across the nation, the brain trust of the activist left is back at it again, this time outside Tesla's showrooms, chanting what can only be described as a terrorist slogan in broad daylight. This person had a sign in New York that said, "Burn a Tesla, save democracy." Yes, because nothing says preserving democracy like threatening to torch electric cars. The irony is so thick you could cut it with one of Elon's Cybertruck doors. Now let's be clear, this isn't a protest. This is domestic terror LARPing with a Spotify playlist and handmade cardboard signs. The so-called Tesla takedown crowd wants you to believe they're fighting for the little guy, but when your rally cry is literally to commit arson against private property because you don't like budget cuts, you're not fighting fascism, you're auditioning for Antifa's street theater division. And the media? Dead silent. Democrat leadership? Nowhere to be found. Funny how they sprint to the podium when one Trump supporter sneezes the wrong way, but can't find the mic when their own side is openly calling for violence against a private company. In this case, one that happens to employ tens of thousands of Americans and literally make electric vehicles. The very thing these eco-activists claim to care about. The hypocrisy isn't subtle. It's a full-blown billboard flashing rules for thee, but not for me. Now let's talk about the logical pretzel these degenerates are twisting themselves into. Their argument boils down to this. Because Musk is working with the Trump administration to make the government less bloated and inefficient, that somehow justifies vandalism, arson, and calls to destroy private property. That's not resistance. That's terrorism with a side of entitlement. And don't be fooled by their fake disclaimers about nonviolence. Their own slogan is a felony. Burn a Tesla, save democracy isn't free speech. It's incitement. It's the political equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater and then pretending you just wanted people to stop eating popcorn. And let's be absolutely clear here. These people aren't protecting democracy. They're trying to bully, vandalize, and terrorize their way into power. They hate that Musk isn't playing their game, that he cut government fat and exposed how much of their paycheck depended on wasting yours. So now they're throwing a nationwide tantrum, and Democrat leaders are letting it happen because the chaos serves their narrative. So here's the truth. If you're chanting for terrorism in the name of democracy, you're not a freedom fighter. You're just another useful idiot in the left's increasingly violent circus. And the fact that no one on their side is condemning this proves exactly who's okay with burning it all down.
There should be an effigy on every street corner. We're New Yorkers. Let's protest like New Yorkers. This maggot motherfucker hates us.
Jesus.
He hates us. Let's hang him high and make pictures. It's the only thing that gets that piece of shit, that lardon sitting and shitting in our White House. Let's hang this high. Who wants to hang this effigy?
And nobody answered.
We're New York. We're New Yorkers.
This is the perfect example of why liberalism is a mental illness. Because nothing says peaceful protest quite like some unhinged old woman screaming about lynching an effigy of the sitting president while swinging it around on a chain in the middle of Brooklyn. Because apparently in 2025, advocating public effigy lynchings is what the left now considers democracy in action. Now let's start with our language. You'll notice how quickly the woman defaults to slurs like MAGA motherfucker and piece of shit while holding an effigy of a President Trump on a chain. This isn't political speech, it's just straight up dehumanization. She's not offering an argument. She's not expressing grievances. She's venting hatred in the crudest, most juvenile way possible, reducing the leader of the free world to a voodoo doll because she's incapable of articulating an actual point. And let's not gloss over the violent imagery. She literally says, let's hang him high and make pictures. That's not a metaphor. That's an open call to mob violence wrapped in a childish tantrum. Imagine for 1 second if a Trump supporter stood outside a Biden rally holding an effigy of Joe Biden on a chain and said the same thing. MSNBC would have it on a 24-hour loop. AOC would be crying about it on Instagram, and the FBI would already be knocking on that person's door. But when it's a left-wing protester spewing violent threats against Trump and openly invoking lynching imagery, suddenly it's passionate activism. Suddenly it's New Yorkers being New Yorkers. Now, this rant is a textbook case of an ad hominem attacking the person instead of the policies. There's no mention of what Trump's actually done to hate New Yorkers? No facts, no substance, no critique of government efficiency reforms, budget cuts, or federal workforce reductions, just pure emotional vomit and sweaty effigy swinging on a chain. She also pathetically employs the bandwagon fallacy, the classic "we're New Yorkers" rallying cry, as if proximity to a pizza joint magically grants moral authority or validates incoherent rage. Newsflash, being loud and from New York doesn't make your argument better, it just makes you obnoxious, especially when no other New Yorkers were joining you to do the thing you were asking them to do. But the most dangerous part isn't the incoherence, it's the normalization of political violence under the guise of resistance. This isn't harmless venting, it's a deliberate attempt to desensitize the public to the idea of political opponents deserving to be strung up, even symbolically. And history is very clear, that kind of rhetoric never stops at symbols. Let's also address the broader hypocrisy at play here. These are the same people who spent 4 years sobbing about Trump's mean tweets and dangerous rhetoric, but when it's their side frothing at the mouth, waving an effigy on a chain, and calling for lynching imagery in public, crickets. Not one Democrat leader has condemned this. Not one mainstream outlet is amplifying the danger of this rhetoric, because when the rage mob is on their side, the rules don't apply. Finally, let's talk about the utter emptiness of this so-called movement. This woman and the Tesla takedown crowd aren't fighting injustice. They're lashing out because a billionaire they used to worship dared to stop playing for their team. They're angry that Musk partnered with Trump to cut bloated federal spending. That's it. They've convinced themselves that government inefficiency is some kind of human right, and anyone who threatens their gravy train must be publicly humiliated and destroyed. This isn't protest, it's a public meltdown. It's the political equivalent of lighting your own hair on fire because someone took away your participation trophy. Look, if you have to resort to effigy lynchings, personal slurs, and violent threats to make your case, you don't have a case. You have a temper tantrum dressed up as activism. And the fact that the media, Democrat leadership, and so-called defenders of democracy refuse to condemn this tells you everything you need to know about who's really stoking division and hate in this country. Well, there you have it, folks. Your daily dose of tolerance and inclusion, live from Columbus, Ohio, where the self-proclaimed saviors of democracy once again showed us how unhinged, unglued, and unintentionally hilarious they really are. At the latest Tesla takedown protest, a group of these professional victims decided to swarm a Trump supporter who had the audacity, the gall, to drive by in a Cybertruck. And what was their brilliant, articulate rebuttal to this man's existence? F you! That's it. That's the entire intellectual offering. A middle school level tantrum screamed at a man sitting inside his truck. Needless to say, this is absolutely pathetic. First, notice the irony. These protesters are supposedly against Tesla, supposedly boycotting Elon Musk and his evil electric cars, and yet the sight of a Cybertruck was enough to trigger a collective meltdown. Why? Because the driver had a Trump hat on. That's the real crime here. He had a MAGA hat, not the car, not the budget cuts, not even the policies, just the fact that someone dared to exist in public without subscribing to their groupthink. Second, this isn't protest, it's performative rage. Their entire argument boils down to yelling obscenities at a complete stranger, proving once again that the activist left's political strategy is basically scream louder, think less. No facts, no debate, No attempt at conversation, just drive-by profanity because they saw a MAGA hat and a Cybertruck and their brains short-circuited. And let's be honest, this is the entire Tesla takedown movement in a nutshell. Empty slogans, performative outrage, and zero substance. They claim to care about democracy, but the second someone exercises their freedom to disagree, they shout them down like toddlers denied dessert. It's not protest, it's a group therapy session for people who mistake their personal meltdowns for moral crusade. So I think it goes without saying that when your entire movement can be summed up by screaming, F you, at a pickup truck, you're not fighting fascism. You're proving that you've become exactly the thing you claim to hate. Angry, intolerant, and completely detached from reality.
How's it going, New York City? Are we ready to fight back? Yes! I really want to thank my colleagues in state government, State Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel and Assemblymember Michael Lasher, because we are here in a moment that demands all of us. It demands all of us because the richest man in the world has purchased the President of the United States. Elon Musk is single-handedly trying to dismantle the federal government of this country. Shame. He is presenting one of the largest threats to organized labor we have ever seen. Shame. And he is trying to tear apart the Social Security system that keeps so many of our loved ones afloat. All while masquerading with the language of fraud and waste, when in reality what it is an attempt to enrich himself. And when we understand this is an attack on our democracy, let us understand that it is an attack on democracies across the world. Because what Elon Musk is doing is emboldening and empowering and echoing the language and the movements of far-right autocrats across the globe. That's correct. And as he stands before us as if he was a self-made brilliant inventor, we know that so much of his wealth was created by tax dollars. So much of his wealth was created by public policy and subsidy. And as that is an indictment on our system to have delivered us a man such as this, it also presents us with an opportunity, because it means that if we choose to stop this style of economic subsidy of one of the greatest threats to our democracy, that we can take the first steps ourselves. That's right. Yes. And I am so thankful to the organizers and the participants in this action and in actions across the country who have made clear that one of the steps is a consumer boycott of Tesla. Yes!
Strap in, folks, because this speech from Zoran Mamdani is a masterclass in bad faith arguments, logical fallacies, and pure uncut political theater disguised as righteous indignation. Let's dismantle this nonsense brick by brick. Now, right off the bat, Mamdani opens with the claim that the richest man in the world has purchased the President of the United States. This isn't analysis. It's a lazy conspiracy theory. There is zero evidence that Elon Musk has purchased President Trump. What Mamdani's actually doing here is engaging in loaded language, throwing out a provocative accusation without providing a single shred of proof. It's rhetorical gasoline meant to ignite outrage without facts. What Musk did is join the administration to lead a Department of Government Efficiency, a public legal appointment confirmed by the federal government, not some backroom bribe. Next, Mamdani trots out the tired strawman argument that Musk is single-handedly trying to dismantle the federal government. No, he's not. Musk has publicly stated repeatedly that his role is to streamline bloated, inefficient agencies and reduce wasteful government spending, the kind of bureaucracy that keeps taxpayers footing the bill for programs with no accountability. But Mamdani knows it's easier to frame it as dismantling than admit that maybe cutting red tape and holding federal agencies accountable isn't tyranny. Then comes the fear-mongering greatest hits. Mamdani accuses Musk of tearing apart the Social Security system, yet there's no actual policy proposal or executive order from Musk or Trump to eliminate or dismantle Social Security. What they've advocated is long-term solvency reform and more efficient budget allocations. But Mamdani prefers to reduce any attempt at fiscal responsibility to "he wants grandma to starve," because nuance doesn't make for good protest signs. And let's not ignore the hypocrisy here. Mamdani stands there railing against the richest man in the world, benefiting from taxpayer subsidies, while conveniently forgetting that the very subsidies he's referencing, electric vehicle credits, green energy initiatives, federal contracts, were all crafted, expanded, and passed by Democrat-led administrations. The Obama-Biden administration alone pumped billions into Tesla and solar projects as part of their green energy push. If you're mad at how Elon Musk got rich, maybe take it up with your own party's policies that helped make it possible. Then he leans into the slippery slope fallacy, claiming that because Musk is working to cut bureaucratic waste, it somehow amounts to an attack on democracy around the globe and emboldens far-right autocrats. This is the kind of nonsense rhetoric that gets applause at rallies but crumbles under the weight of basic logic. Cutting the IRS workforce by 20% isn't exactly Mussolini's march on Rome. Mamdani also conveniently leaves out key context. The Department of Government Efficiency's reforms are overwhelmingly focused on non-essential federal bloat, redundant programs, wasteful spending, and regulatory agencies that have been operating unchecked for decades. The reductions aren't targeting essential services, they're trimming the fat. But again, it's easier to scream, "He's killing democracy," than admit to the truth. The left is angry because someone finally called out how much of their political machine runs on government jobs, overregulation, and unchecked spending. Finally, let's talk about Mamdani's call for a consumer boycott of Tesla. This is peak virtue signaling nonsense. Tesla employs tens of thousands of American workers, many of whom are unionized or protected under labor laws that Mamdani claims to care about. A boycott won't hurt Elon Musk. It'll hurt the factory workers, the engineers, the service techs, real middle-class Americans. But that's the thing about these protests. They're not designed to help anyone. They're designed to feed the outrage machine, fuel donor emails, and give career politicians a viral soundbite. Which, shall I note, this guy's running for New York mayor, so that's where all this is coming from. Anyway, to summarize, Mamdani's speech is a pile of logical fallacies dressed up as righteous fury. It's ad hominem attacks, baseless conspiracy theories, misrepresentation of facts, and economic illiteracy all rolled into one, and no one in his audience will question it because outrage is a product they're really selling. So you want to actually talk about threats to democracy? It's not Musk cutting government waste. It's elected officials like Mamdani standing in front of a crowd, lying to their faces and calling that leadership. Again, this man is running for New York mayor. But the absurdity around the so-called movement was never as obvious as it was in Seattle, where Tesla building security literally stood overhead watching protesters dance in the street like it was a low-budget flash mob audition. Imagine thinking you're toppling corporate power by awkwardly two-stepping in front of an electric car dealership while the people you're supposedly fighting sip coffee and laugh from the balcony. This is what the activist left has become. A TikTok protest movement where the revolution starts and ends with bad choreography and zero impact. The only thing they dismantled that day was their own dignity. At the end of the day, you gotta ask yourself, how did we get here? How did political protest evolve into glorified tantrums, empty gestures, and performative outrage masquerading as resistance? When did yelling F you at a truck or dancing in the street under a corporate security's bored gaze become the pinnacle of civic engagement? And more importantly, why are so many people willing to swallow these narratives without ever questioning who's really pulling the strings or profiting from the chaos? If the so-called defenders of democracy are the ones tearing at its fabric, what exactly are they defending? Maybe it's time to stop cheering for the loudest voices and start asking who benefits when mobs rage without reason. Because when protest becomes pageantry and fury replaces facts, it's not the elites who suffer, it's you. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.